Hi, I hope that you guys are doing well. My name is Randy Ramphal. I am a licensed master's social worker. In the past, I did some motivational videos to inspire others, and I wanted to continue that, but instead speak about some issues that people encounter on a daily basis, and then provide some information that might be useful for them to bring awareness and enlightenment so that they can be empowered and be able to deal and cope with the challenges they encounter on a daily basis. So, my philosophy and my core belief is that in order for someone to be empowered, they must be enlightened and aware of the situation that they are encountering and also the resources that are available to them in order to strive. So, today's topic, I wanted to speak on the idea of verbal abuse. Verbal abuse is a form of emotional and psychological abuse that occurs when a perpetrator wants some type of control and power over another. So there are many types or ways of how verbal abuse can be manifested, and that can be manifested through belittling, shaming, criticizing, being condescending, manipulating others by your words and by the way that you treat them, right? So we live in a society that normalizes verbal abuse to some extent. So, for instance, if someone is being belittled, for instance, right, or someone speaks to them in a condescending way, it is very easy for them to say, oh, that's just how the person is, or they'll get over that. But in reality, what they are doing is that they are continuing a cycle where it is okay to verbally abuse someone because that's just the way people are. There are a lot of microaggression that happen to people who encounter verbal abuse in which the perpetrator does to the person on the receiving end or the one who's being abused verbally. A lot of times when we speak of abuse, people may think of physical, sexual, emotional, psychological, and neglect. And all these are forms of abuse that has such a negative impact in our lives or in the lives of those who experience it. But a lot of times verbal abuse is left out of the conversation, even though it is a form of emotional and psychological abuse. But this needs to be spoken more about. So, when we think about verbal abuse, I want to make this clear that it does not only happen in a relationship between a husband and wife or significant others. This can happen in a parent-child relationship. It can happen in a grandparent grandchild relationship. It could happen in a teacher student relationship. It can happen in any relationship that you are in. Verbal abuse can happen, but we have to be able to recognize the signs and what that is and be able to speak up and advocate for ourselves, even if it means taking some time to be silent for a moment before and think before we speak out on how we are being treated by others. So, when it comes to verbal abuse, right, and as I said, it could happen to anyone, a lot of times um, when someone does verbally abuse another person, it has like a long lasting impact on them. It could affect them psychological, social, spiritual, and just break them down, their whole being. So when we talk about the psychological impact, is that could lead into depression. It could lead into feeling hopeless. It can lead into breaking down of your self-esteem, your self-worth. It has you questioning a lot about yourself, right? Think about it this way. If somebody keeps belittling you, for instance, and calling you stupid or calling you any demeaning name or just being condescending to you and humiliating you, right? Then sometimes you start believing what they're saying, and sometimes you start feeling like you can't get out of the situation and you just don't know how to get out of the situation. And it becomes even worse when we are so used to or normalizing it and just being, well, oh, that's just how the person is, and we kind of accept and embrace that, right? So that can have such a bad impact on our in our lives that I don't think a lot of times people are aware of the impact that verbal abuse can have on people who encounter it. Apart from the psychological part of breaking you down, that could even help stifle your dreams. Because think about this, if you are going to work on a dream or going to move forward, right, you need to give it all your energy and you need to give it all you got in order to get that dream or to accomplish that goal that you want to accomplish. But when you have somebody who's always belittling you or somebody who's always criticizing you, or you have all that negative energy, that weighs you down to the point of you have to work extra hard in order to rise above the occasion, or to accomplish that goal. You have to work extra hard. So it is very good to kind of recognize that this is affecting your whole life. This could affect your whole life. When we think about even the spiritual aspect, right? You're trying to pray, you're trying to do yoga, you're trying to do whatever you do for spirituality or even self-care, right? When there is that verbal abuse, you're constantly dealing with that negative energy that would always tell you, well, maybe you're not good enough. Or even if you do meditation, sometimes a lot of things that people would say to you, sometimes it can surface in the forefront, and then you can't focus anymore, and that becomes something that is traumatic for you in itself, right? So I just want you to kind of think about verbal abuse, and it is very good to kind of stop people on their tracks, actually, when you think about the relationships that you have, right? Think about the relationships that you're in, think about the way that you treat others. And if you feel like somebody is not speaking to you in the manner that you should be spoken to, then it is okay to tell them, like, hey, I don't like the way that you're speaking to me, right? I don't like the way that you're talking to me. I think that this needs to change, right? And that sometimes it might even mean walking away from a relationship. It might mean, taking a break from a relationship, for instance, because in order for you to be better. Sometimes it might mean walking away. And one of the things to realize is that when it comes to verbal abuse, sometimes it occurs from people who are closest to us. It can occur from, between a couple, between brothers and sisters. It can occur in different ways and manifest different ways. So you have to be able to know that if you decide that you want to speak out against it, sometimes it might be very painful because it means that you might lose some people from your life, and that's fine. Because at the end of the day, everyone should be treated with dignity and respect. As a human being, they should be treated with dignity and respect. And if someone is not respecting you and respecting who you are, it does not make sense to continue to foster and battle that because they're not accepting you for who you are. You have to be able to embrace that and recognize that I am worth more than this. And I don't have to put up with this verbal abuse. I don't have to kind of live and meet people's standards. I should be able to live according to my standards and the way that I see fit that meet my needs as a person, as a human being, right? So now you're probably thinking, well, how can you tell the difference between verbal abuse and an argument? Because a lot of times people have, arguments, and then how can you distinguish between the two? So, as we were mentioning earlier, when we think about verbal abuse, that is a cycle of a pattern of behavior where there's control, right? There's something for control, power and control. There's patterns of behaviors, right? But when you think about an argument, right, it's something, okay, well, an argument happened now. The person might call you a name, or they might call you a name, but it's not something that is constant. It is something where they would tell you in that moment, but at the end of that argument, they would come to that place of maybe reason or hearing what each other have to say. in being verbally abused, the relationship is not the same. It's not that, both of you are coming to a place of reasoning, or the name calling and the criticizing and stuff happens constantly all the time. It happens repeatedly because it's a pattern of behavior. So you have to kind of recognize an argument is not basically a pattern of behaviors, but when you think about verbal abuse, you are thinking about the pattern of behaviors. And then you have to think about, well, how can I break that cycle? Or how can I change that cycle of, this pattern of behavior? And again, as I mentioned to you before, sometimes it can mean speaking out, and letting the person know that the way you speak to me, I'm not accepting this. I'm not embracing this. I am not laughing it out and being like, oh, well, that person was gonna change. It's not gonna be like that. Sometimes we have to be firm in order to get the respect that we deserve and the respect that we should have as human beings. So I just want you to just know the difference between the argument and verbal abuse, and basically how verbal abuse presents itself, and how you can do that. And sometimes, as I said, it means walking away and protecting your sanity, protecting your respect, you protecting your self-worth, protecting you, right? That is what it's about. And it's not selfish. If you experience in verbal abuse, and I want you to do this when you look at this video, I want you to take some time and reflect, even if it means writing it down. I want you to take some time and to reflect on the relationships that you share with people, the relationships that bring you discomfort, and what is it in that relationship that brings you discomfort? Is it the way that people speak to you? If it's the way that people speak to you that brings you discomfort or bring you sadness, then think about the things that they say to you. Is that considered abuse? And if that's the case, think about the relationship and what role do they play in your life, right? So if it's kind of like, oh, it's just a friend that is treating me this way, guess what? You can walk away from that, right? You can walk away from that. You could put yourself first. It's not going to be easy, but again, we have to be able to get out of situations in a smart way, where we would be able to um, protect ourselves from any kind of danger, protecting ourselves and knowing that we are going to be okay. So you think about the relationships. When you reflect, you think about the relationships you hold, the relationships that you feel discomfort in, right? And what does that look like for you? What does that discomfort look like? What do you feel when that discomfort come when you're around that person? And if you feel like there is verbal abuse, then you know what? Think about um how can you release yourself from that situation, right? How can you release yourself in the sense of, do you have to speak up for yourself? Do you have to maybe talk to that person less? You have to come to that place where you would recognize that. Okay, so you just have to think about these things, reflect and think about the relationships in your life, and see how meaningful. And then also during that reflection, think about the relationships in your life that makes you happy, that makes you feel happy. And what about these relationships that make you feel happy? And compare the both and kind of see which ones make you feel less than, which one embrace you for who you are, and start being with the ones that make you to be who you are and makes you want to be there. Okay, so again, please share this video if you like what you hear. If it brings any kind of enlightenment or awareness, please leave a comment, and I will respond to you. Okay, I hope that this was inspirational. I hope that you gained something from this. I'm waiting to hear the feedbacks. Thank you so much. Have a good night. Bye.